I'm recording. So that's a gallery walk from that 2-day weekend workshop Kinksent in Melbourne. And we started on the first day with the polyvagal map, where we have the distinction between how it feels in your body if you're safe or if you're not safe, and how the nervous system has different features of co-regulation and self-regulation, and that we actually need to be safe to make choices from an empowered place, where BDSM, kink and play and sensuality is fitting in. From there we went into the sensory dynamic of our nervous system, how to feel and opening up our inflow, so that our action towards our felt sense of pleasure is creating a magic of engagement in our own nervous system, where we said that when we claim that as our base, we have always something we can fall back onto. And from there, we just actually distinction between the direct route of pleasure, so our inflow, and the indirect route where we actually go in an action so that we have a respond. So where we said, when we have the inflow open, that we have a sensual matrix in our nervous system, a default, and where the indirect route of pleasure is the secondary route, is the way of kink and BDSM and play, so that we can engage and interact with the person's neurological responses in a safe environment. So the next map, that we had the distinction between how our brain in different situations works, so that we're looping a story when we're not safe, when our nervous system is detecting some danger, and there was some question how to just break out of that, literally come into our body. And the way how we described it is by using our noticing brain, that our noticing brain has this connection to our working brain, to our feeling body, and as well to our reptile brain, so how we shut down. And when we literally use the direct route of pleasure, the feeling sense, that we have the self-regulating capacity of blocking and the release of cortisol and adrenaline from our fight and flight center, our amygdala, that we can actually self-regulate ourselves back into a place of safety and connection, specifically through the sensually inflow. From there we translated that dynamic into the engagement system, the somatic consent engagement system, where we have been asking ourselves, when we are in an action, is it action for us or is it for the other person? And if there is no permission or no agreement, that we're actually operating from a place of shadow. As well, if we can't say no, we operate from a place of shadow, where our nervous system normally goes into a survival mechanism, into a kind of a danger or life threat, and where play and BDSM and kink is happening is not in the shadow place, even so we can work intentionally with shadows, but not as a life threat, as a real shock or trauma or retrieving anything, so that we just went in the place that where real engagement happening, where winning is happening for all involved, is the so-called apex, the top of this structure, where we operating from an interpersonal place of engagement, where we make an invitation where it is for both, so that we have a transformative spiritual experience, if we want to say so, so that we can opening up into this realm. Then we just went into the empowerment map, so that there's a specific dynamic we have to have in place first, how to choose about what we want and what our desire is, so that the giving person doesn't have to go into an action to belong or to just make the other person feel good, so that the giving person is literally allowing the receiving person in the first place through enough time and space to find their own choice and their own desire. And then we just figured out as well that the wheel of consent is not covering in the depth this dynamic that it is really for both. So that we just figured out it has to be for both, and it has to come from the interpersonal space of that is what both people want, where we have an invitation out instead of an offer or a request. And translated that into the dynamic of play as well, into the dynamic of the engagement zones, where we actually figured out that it's true, it's either our action, it's for you, it's for them, but that we can as well come from this place of the apex, the middle place, that we have to have all dynamics embodied, that we can making empowered choices as well as being capable of having our limits and boundaries in the right place, so that we just use the dynamics to have an upward spiral into transformation instead of a downward spiral into a trauma or into a shutdown. That was 2 days of Kinksent. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and if you just see me around with that workshop, I invite you to join. Thank you.
Thank you.